Greetings and salutations. I am Poetic Heretic here with a special report entitled Doorstep Devils, the Black-Eyed Kids. There has been a multitude of reports in recent years of strange beings showing up at people's doors, filling them with absolute terror. These beings have come to be known as the Black-Eyed Kids, a name in reference to their solid black eyes, including the area of the eye that is normally white. Just who or what are these strange children, or are they children at all? This report takes a look at what they might be, as well as some of the most terrifying encounters with them ever reported. Black-eyed kids appear to be kids with eyes that are completely black. They have pale skin and are usually between the ages of 6 and 16. They always have one singular request: to be let inside one's home or vehicle. They have monotone voices and seem to appear out of nowhere. When they knock, it is a slow, steady, not very human-sounding knock. They do not at all behave like normal children and are generally very terrifying for those who encounter them. However, due to still inconclusive evidence of their existence, they may just be an urban legend. There are a number of theories about just what black-eyed kids are. The first is that they are mistaken for kids who just have very dilated pupils. This is theoretically possible, though it does not account for much of the data and eyewitness testimony, such as inexplicable feelings of fear prior to an encounter. Another theory is that they are kids wearing contact lenses. There are literally special contact lenses available for purchase online that are all black and cover the entire eye. They are technically illegal, but they are still relatively cheap and easy to access. This theory is made more plausible in that kids can be great pranksters, though again it is a theory that does not account for all the data. The third theory is that these entities are actually alien hybrids. Proponents of this theory point out that black-eyed kids resemble gray aliens in having all black eyes and pale skin. Others think they might have something to do with the Men in Black, identifying similarities such as showing up at one's door late at night, causing the witness to feel compelled to answer the door and let them in, and the general feeling of dread accompanying them. Some theorize that they are demonic entities, understandable to the extent that they often seem to exude a sense of pure evil. Still, others suspect the black-eyed kids are ghosts, a theory that would explain their reported tendency to just appear and disappear suddenly, as well as their deathly appearance. Another theory is that they are some form of vampires and/or undead. The idea that they are vampires is somewhat appealing in that they have very pale skin and seem to require an invitation to enter one's home, just like a vampire. However, this theory still falls short of explaining everything. The final theory is that they are jinn, other dimensional creatures in Islamic mythology that are said to sometimes be able to enter our reality and who often like to play tricks, as well as having the ability to shapeshift. These tendencies certainly make this theory appear quite plausible as far as supernatural explanations go. So what is it like to actually encounter a black-eyed kid or kids? Let us take a look at 4 stories from witnesses who claim to experience just that. The first is an account that took place Halloween night in northern Texas from a person who said she did not believe in the paranormal. There were very few trick-or-treaters this night, which was odd. The witness was watching some scary TV shows around 9:30 in the evening with her husband in the living room. There had been no one at the door for more than 30 minutes, and due to the late hour, they decided to turn off the outside lights and let out their dog, Chloe. They were keeping her in her crate so she wouldn't scare any of the kids, but now that she was out, She lay at the witness' feet while she was seated on the couch. At this point, her husband decided he would go shower before going to bed, since it was now close to 10 p.m. and he had to be up early the following day. The witness was alone with Chloe. She was feeling a bit anxious from the creepy shows she was watching. Soon after hearing the water upstairs turn on, she heard a light, steady knock at the door. First she was annoyed because it was getting late, but then a very bad feeling flooded through her. She wondered why they would even knock when the doorbell glows in the dark, which should have been quite obvious without any other lights out there. She couldn't decide what to do at first, but then she decided she couldn't just ignore it. She heard the steady knock again at the door. Chloe had disappeared. She thought the dog would be at the front door, but she wasn't. After looking a bit, the witness found her huddled near the back door as if she wanted out. This was unusual behavior for her and made the witness even more uneasy. She told Chloe to get back in her crate, but she wouldn't move. She tried to yell for her husband, but then she realized he couldn't hear her. She heard still more steady knocking at the door. After that, the headlights of a vehicle driving down the street illuminated the door enough to where she could see two young children through the door window. She felt relief. She approached the door. She activated the porch light and observed the kids. She wondered why they were out so late and what kind of parents would allow such a thing. She opened the door no more than 2 feet. She noticed the mysterious kids weren't wearing Halloween costumes, but instead just typical clothes. They did not say trick or treat. The witness' anxiety returned. One of the kids was a girl and the other was a boy. The girl looked to be about 11 or 12 and stood on the left. The witness could tell she had blonde hair, but the kids' faces were mostly obscured from the porch lights located above and behind them. The inside light was not on them. The boy on the right looked about 8 or 9, was about 1 foot shorter, and appeared to have light brown hair. The girl spoke. "Ma'am, can we please come inside and use your phone to call our mom?" Something did not feel right at all to the witness when she heard this. In these modern times, why didn't this kid have a cell phone, she wondered. She then asked the girl this. At this point, things got much weirder. The kids looked at each other, but didn't say anything, though they looked like they were going to. Then they looked at the witness again, and the girl said, "Ma'am, my cell phone battery doesn't have any charge left in it. Can we please come inside and call our mother? We're alone out here, and my brother is scared." The witness felt mixed emotions at this point. Part of her really wanted to help the children contact their mom, but another part of her felt a very strong fear that something was not right. She then noticed she had opened the door a bit more without even realizing it. She said to the girl, "Honey, why don't you give me your mother's number and I can call her myself?" After a pause, the kids looked at each other again. They then looked back at the witness and the girl said, "Ma'am, my little brother has to use your bathroom. Can we please come inside while you call our mom?" The little girl then approached the door as if expecting to enter. The inside light hit her, revealing to the witness her solid black eyes. The witness' motherly desire to help faded completely and was replaced by the most extreme terror she had ever felt. She nearly closed the door, only her face peeking out. The little girl then said, "Please, ma'am, we're really scared and alone out here. We have to come inside. Please help us." They began to cry. The witness was then completely overcome by her fear. She closed the door and locked it. She said loudly so they could hear, "I'll call your mom if you give me the number, but I'm not letting you in my house." She was still able to see them out there, staring in at her. She thought of running to get her husband, but she was terrified even more at the thought of losing track of where the strange children were. After a few seconds that felt like forever, she thought of calling her neighbor across the street. Approaching the phone, she looked toward the back door. Chloe was gone. They located her later hiding under a bed. She reached the phone. At that time, the creepy kids finally moved, walking back toward the street. Instead of calling her neighbor just then, she went back to the door and watched. She could see very little detail through the glass. However, she could still see that the strange children remained standing directly beneath the streetlight closest to her house. They were staring at her. She called her neighbor, and the kids began walking away. Her neighbor came out, and she met him under the street lamp. But by then, it was as if the kids had vanished. The witness maintains her belief that these were some kind of pranksters, but she also notes that they were so good, they completely scared not only her, but also her dog. The second story tells of a night that started off like any other. This witness was going back and forth between watching YouTube videos and playing music before deciding to go rest in the extra bed in his newborn daughter's room. He had just fallen asleep when he heard a strange light pounding in the front porch area. He looked around the room, but then thought it was probably just his cat, scratching an itch. He went back to sleep. The thumping returned. He thought it was his cat again. He went to look out on the porch, but his cat wasn't there. He didn't feel like going back to sleep, so he went to watch a YouTube video. After a few minutes, he suddenly felt like looking up at the window in the kitchen. He saw them. They were short, only the tops of their heads visible. They were too short to see inside. The witness hadn't heard any footsteps on his porch. They knocked again, and that was when he realized it was the same sound he originally thought was his cat. He closed his laptop and sneaked past the door back into his daughter's room. He assumed it was just some troublemakers that he did not want to deal with. When he got to the baby's room, things got really creepy. The thumping was no longer coming from the kitchen, but now from both the bedroom windows. The windows were a room apart, yet the thumping was the same steady rhythm on both of them. He was now concerned they would wake up his daughter. This really pissed him off, causing him to go back and open the kitchen door, ready to hunt them down. That was when he saw them standing there. Two boys who looked to be about 10 or 11 looked up at him. He smelled mold and felt intense fear. The shorter boy asked him, "May we use your telegraph?" The witness just stared in horror as he then realized both boys' eyes were completely black. The boy then requested again to use his telegraph. The night was silent. He tried to ignore the weirdness of the strange boy saying telegraph and simply told him he doesn't have service at his house. They both looked enraged by this. The witness then shut and locked the door as fast as he could and returned to protect his daughter. He was scared by how she hadn't woken up, but as he held her, he saw she was still breathing normally and seemed just fine. The thumping at the windows returned. The witness held his daughter in his arms and stayed close to the wall as he fell to the floor and cried, feeling powerless and terrified. He stayed there like that for quite some time, all the way until finally his wife's alarm clock went off. As soon as her alarm went off, the thumping stopped. He went into the master bedroom, still holding the baby. His wife asked what was wrong with him. He simply said, "I just had a bad dream." His wife then asked him to hand her the baby so she could feed her. He did so, and the day began like any other day. He turned on all the lights and made coffee for his wife. Her being up helped him calm down to the point that he could act like nothing happened. He walked her to her car that morning, holding the baby in his arms. He requested that she not leave until he was back inside. She thought this was strange, but did so anyway. He locked the door once he was back inside. All he could do was sit there horrified all day until his wife returned. He insisted they go stay at his brother's house in the neighboring town for the weekend. At the time of his testimony, the witness said he remained sitting there horrified while his wife and daughter lay asleep in the guest room. He kept wondering why the thumping stopped when the alarm sounded. He then theorized and felt strongly that it was because he had already heard of black-eyed kids, but his wife hadn't, and that perhaps being aware of their existence is the very thing that makes them visit. The witness concluded his testimony with the words, "I'm afraid and I'm sorry." This next encounter is an odd one. Instead of black-eyed kids, this witness claimed to see 3 black-eyed elderly people. In my opinion, this only made things that much creepier. The encounter took place around 1996 or 97. The witness lived in an old house with a cemetery at the end of the street. He was up late one night on the computer around 2 or 3 a.m. when he looked out the window at the road toward the cemetery. He saw 3 senior citizens slowly strolling down the street. They were wearing funeral clothes. There were 2 women and 1 man, and they all looked like they were around 80 years old. 2 of them were helping one of the women to walk. The woman being helped was walking between the other 2, and she looked upset. The witness first thought that she was mourning her dead husband, which had caused her to go to the cemetery at such a late hour, and the other 2 were family and or friends who came to help her. The witness kept watching as they drew closer. There was a street lamp in front of the house, and all 3 of them stopped when they got to it. The unhappy woman then looked at the witness and grinned. The grin turned to a grimace, and her face became deathly white like a corpse. The witness looked into her eyes, realizing they were black as the void. Time slowed to nearly a standstill. The brief moment the witness made eye contact with her felt like minutes, becoming focused on her eyes, which looked like 2 black holes. It felt like she was moving closer. The other 2 seemed to be just looking down the street, as if they weren't going to move until this strange old woman was done doing whatever she was doing. The witness suddenly felt intense fear and fell to the floor. He got back up to look out the window almost immediately, and the 3 of them were gone. Disturbingly, due to the shape of the road and surroundings, it would have been impossible for any ordinary person to become hidden so quickly. The 4th and final encounter we will go over here is perhaps the scariest of all. Technically, this witness did not reveal his or her gender, so for the sake of convenience, we will assume the witness is male. This witness began his testimony by affirming that he had always been a skeptic. He read a lot of scary stories online, but never really believed them. His story began one night after he left his mother's house. He had gone over to comfort her because her husband had just died. It was almost 11 p.m. The streetlights were shining on the road, in contrast to the darkened houses across the street, giving everything a very eerie vibe. He entered his car and waved. His mother waved back from the doorway and mouthed the words, "Be careful." He decided to take some back roads home because doing so would make it a shorter drive. He lived in an old farmhouse out in the country at this time. His father had warned him over the years, quote, "Don't go out at night and always beware the devils." His father always had a powerful belief in the paranormal and superstition, which the witness had found a bit funny over the years, though he knew his father meant well. Out in the country on his way home, it was dark without any streetlights as he drove over poorly paved roads plagued with potholes. There were empty barren fields on both sides of the road. Visibility was about as low as it could get that night, without even the moon offering much light, continually covered by dark and ominous clouds. It looked like a storm might be rolling in. It wasn't long until he heard thunder. He started to feel somewhat anxious, but didn't know why. All the stories he had read about ghosts and legends came to mind, and he noticed the mood of this night reflected them well. He turned on the radio and tried to find a clear station. He got nothing but static, despite the presence of a broadcasting tower nearby, whose station usually came through loud and clear. This only worsened his anxiety. He held on to his steering wheel as more thunder sounded. He angrily turned off the radio before noticing his gas gauge approaching empty. He began looking for a gas station. As he was doing so, he detected the shadows of two figures in his peripheral vision walking down the side of the road. They were walking slowly, and they attempted to hitchhike as he drove by. He felt compelled and actually started to turn the wheel as if to give them a ride, but then he realized what a bad idea that probably was. He sped past them, despite feeling strangely fascinated by them. It began to rain, causing a dip in his already anxious mood. The storm was getting closer. He looked in his rear view mirror. He saw the two shadowy figures, who now appeared to be walking faster. He wondered if their appearing to walk faster was his imagination, since such a thing shouldn't be discernible in the dark. Then, to his great relief, he spotted a sign for a nearby gas station. He tried not to think of the two ominous figures. Not long after this, he slowly entered the gas station, just as it started to rain harder. He pulled up to the pump and nervously exited his vehicle, looking over his shoulder, still feeling very paranoid. It was hard for him to even focus on how to pump the gas. The rain increased even more in intensity as he finally began to pump the gas. His hand would not stop shaking, and he didn't think it was just because of the frigid atmosphere. All of a sudden, the gas stop's overhead lights started flickering violently, some of them even going out completely. It felt to him like the temperature went down by 20 degrees in no more than a few seconds. He started looking around as a horrible feeling began welling up inside him. He turned around to face the road again. What he saw made his stomach drop and his face turn white. On the other side of the street stood the two figures from earlier. They were facing him. They began walking slowly towards him as he was trying to get the gas pump to cooperate. His whole body shook, not at all helped by the loud and ferocious thunder. He looked up. The ominous figures had reached the entrance. He was breathing fast as he haphazardly put the pump away. He couldn't stop watching the frightening figures. His anxiety increased as they got still closer, despite the fact that now he could see they were just two soaked teenagers. He felt terrified, yet also strangely compelled to talk to them. At this point, they were right by the next pump as the witness got back into his car, shaking uncontrollably. He dropped his keys. As he was sitting up again after grabbing the keys, one of the kids was right at his window. He was knocking. The knock was a steady rhythm. He rolled down the window slightly, while the other teen stood back and grinned. The teen at the window spoke. He said, "Can you give us a ride into town? We missed the bus and don't have a ride." His words were spoken unnaturally slow. The witness tried to say something, but couldn't. Then he cleared his throat and nervously told them, "I'm sorry, but I'm not going into town." He did not look at them directly when he said this. The kid knocked again, this time harder, and almost demanded a ride. He told him no yet again. This time he looked up at him. He was horrified by what he saw. He looked right at the kid's eyes and gasped as he saw they were nothing but pure black. After this, the witness immediately started his car and began to take off. As he was doing so, the black-eyed kid banged his ghostly white fist on the car window and screamed for a ride. He hit the gas and was on the road again. He kept mentally apologizing to his father for never having listened to his warnings of terrors in the night. It wasn't long until he was home and fled into the house after pulling his car right up to his front door and getting out as quickly as possible. He didn't even bother to close his car door. Once inside, he immediately locked and barricaded the door with a chair. He fell into this chair and started to cry, shaking violently as two dark figures stood in his driveway. That concludes this report. As one can see from all that I have gone over here, black-eyed kid encounters are some very disturbing phenomena. While it remains uncertain if they are real or if all the stories about them are made up, it is interesting to consider that more and more people have claimed to see them in recent years. What do I think? At this point, I actually have to side a bit more with the skeptics and say that overall the black-eyed kids seem to be more in the realm of urban legend than any likely reality. I just have not seen enough convincing reports of them to seriously think they might be real, though that may change one day. Additionally, most stories I came across in the research for this report had an artificial and made-up sound to them. I will admit, however, that there were a couple that did not quite match this description. Who knows? Maybe, just maybe, these strange otherworldly children with totally black eyes do exist. And maybe, as was claimed to be the case with the gentleman earlier, now that you have watched this report and know about them, they will pay you a late-night visit too. If so, whatever you do, don't let them in. This has been another report from Poetic Heretic. Thanks for watching.